They were fast, wild, and sometimes downright dangerous. Cars so extreme, so controversial, they were banned and buried by the companies that created them. No commercials, no legacy, no trace. These weren't just rare, they were erased from history on purpose. Built in secret, sold in silence, and pulled before the world could react. Here are 12 banned American cars the automakers hoped you'd never hear about, until now. Number 1. The 1972 Ford Maverick Blackbird V8 prototype is one of those whispered legends in muscle car history, part ghost story, part cautionary tale. Though it never officially entered production, and no showroom ever carried it, the Blackbird still haunts the imaginations of hardcore Ford enthusiasts and automotive historians. It was an experiment that flew too close to the sun, a compact economy car transformed into a raw, unfiltered street missile, only to be deemed too dangerous for its own good. Officially, it never existed. But in the right circles, among retired Ford engineers, collectors of obscure prototypes, and old track techs, the Blackbird's name still carries weight. To understand the origins of the Blackbird, you have to understand the Maverick itself. Introduced in 1970, the Ford Maverick was never intended to be a performance vehicle. It was a basic, lightweight, affordable compact, meant to compete with imports like the VW Beetle and to give American buyers a no-frills economy car that still felt like a Ford. But what the Maverick lacked in flair, it made up for in potential. It was light, rear-wheel drive, and importantly, it could be coaxed into accepting larger engines. Ford engineers noticed that, and a small skunk works team at Dearborn began wondering, what if the Maverick wasn't just a commuter box? What if it was a weapon? Thus was born the Blackbird project, named with tongue-in-cheek bravado after the SR-71 spy plane, a machine built for speed and secrecy. The Blackbird Maverick was envisioned as a stripped-down, high-performance version of the humble compact, a kind of street-legal predator that could fly under the radar. Weight was the enemy, so Ford engineers deleted everything non-essential: sound deadening, rear seats, air conditioning, even the passenger side mirror in some test units. What remained was a skeleton of a car, lean, minimal, and begging for horsepower. Into this featherweight chassis, the team shoehorned a specially tuned 302 cubic inch small block V8, using lightweight aluminum components, aggressive cams, and a high-rise intake manifold. Some insiders claimed it revved higher than any Ford V8 of the time, topping 7,000 RPM with frightening ease. Power estimates ranged wildly, from 325 to 375 horsepower, though no official dyno sheets were ever released. Rumors even swirled about a short-stroke 289 prototype version that sounded like an angry chainsaw on nitromethane. Early tests were jaw-dropping. From a standstill, the Blackbird could reportedly outrun a stock Boss 302 Mustang to 60 mph, thanks to its low curb weight and explosive throttle response. But it didn't take long for cracks, literal and figurative, to appear. The Maverick's basic architecture wasn't built for this level of abuse. At high speeds, the body flexed, and the rear end, still based on simple leaf springs, became twitchy and unpredictable. Brake fade set in after a few hard laps. Steering response was sharp at low speeds, but nervous at triple digits. And then came the infamous event, known only through fragments in technician notes and whispered accounts. During a high-speed test at Ford's Dearborn Proving Grounds, a Blackbird prototype reportedly suffered a catastrophic failure on the banking. Sources conflict. Some say it was a tie rod that failed. Others blame rear leaf spring separation. But what's certain is that the car violently lost control. The test driver survived but was hospitalized, and the mood around the project changed instantly. What had been an exciting skunkworks experiment suddenly felt reckless, even dangerous. Within days, the project was canceled. Executives wary of liability and with memories still fresh from safety backlash in the late 60s, ordered the program shelved. One internal memo reportedly described the car as a hazard disguised as a Maverick. All test vehicles were allegedly destroyed, some crushed, others stripped for parts and buried in inventory. Records were shredded or locked away. The Blackbird had vanished before the public even knew it existed. Only traces remain. A few grainy photographs showing a flat black Maverick with wide tires and hood pins. Scribbled notes in old employee notebooks referring to BB1 and high RPM test cell number 7. A scrap of aluminum firewall with odd bracketry, salvaged from a Detroit junkyard and now hanging in a private collection. And stories. Stories told by retired engineers and gearheads who swear they saw it run, who remember the way it sounded, violent, high-strung, unlike any Maverick or any Ford compact, before or since. As one former Ford test driver put it, the Blackbird wasn't a car, it was a dare. And like many dares, it went too far. Today, the 1972 Ford Maverick Blackbird remains one of the great what-ifs of the muscle car world. A prototype born of ambition, performance madness, and a refusal to play by the rules. Until reality caught up. It's a ghost story for gearheads. A missile with no target. Number 2. The 1973 AMC Hornet Street Blade V8 Edition is one of the most obscure and intriguing ghost cars of the muscle era, a machine that barely made it out of AMC's engineering labs before being buried under a shroud of corporate silence, government red tape, and mechanical overreach. It was a car born of ambition, desperation, and perhaps a touch of recklessness, a last-ditch effort to infuse serious street credibility into one of AMC's most humble platforms. Though almost completely erased from official records, the whispers of its existence persist. Through the recollections of retired engineers, a few salvaged components with inexplicable VTN tags, and one black and white photo that continues to spark speculation in underground muscle forums. To understand the Street Blade, you have to understand AMC in 1973. With the big three choking the performance market with high-profile muscle machines, AMC, chronically underfunded and constantly playing catch-up, was desperate for a breakthrough. The Hornet, introduced in 1970, was a tidy, affordable compact, built for economy but just sturdy enough to support performance variants. The company had already flirted with performance on the platform with the Hornet SC 360 in 1971, a short-lived sleeper muscle car. But by 1973, emission standards were tightening, insurance costs were soaring, and the SC's 360 was already history. Still, inside AMC, a few performance diehards weren't ready to give up. That's when the Street Blade project was born, a last-gasp experiment to build a purebred, fire-breathing Hornet that could rival the Camaro Z28 or Mustang Mach-1, not just on the street, but on the track. The idea was audacious. Take a Hornet hatchback, strip it to the bone, drop in a specially prepped AMC 304 or even the Wild 360 V8, fit it with upgraded suspension, disc brakes all around and radically altered bodywork designed to reduce drag and improve high-speed stability. According to a declassified engineering memo from AMC's old Kenosha archives, the Street Blade included flared fiberglass fenders, a custom vented hood, deep air dams, and even a one-off adjustable rear wing mounted directly to the hatch glass. Inside, it was stripped and race-ready. No sound deadening, a roll bar style brace behind the seats, and deeply bolstered sport buckets. Several prototypes reportedly included a crude 4-point harness setup and a floor-mounted manual shifter with a short-throw Hurst linkage. The dash was custom modified with auxiliary gauges, including a prominently center-mounted tachometer with an indicated red line at 7,200 Talon RPM. Weight savings were taken seriously. Some prototype parts were aluminum, and others appeared to be repurposed from surplus AMX racing programs. But the dream quickly began to unravel. While the small block V8 was potent, outputting somewhere in the 280 and 310 horsepower range in test tune, the rest of the car wasn't ready. The Hornet's basic chassis, even stiffened with subframe reinforcements, began to show signs of flex under heavy cornering. At high speeds, the Street Blade was astonishingly fast in a straight line, but suffered from pronounced understeer and tight curves. More troubling was the aerodynamic package, which looked menacing but was largely experimental. Several test drivers reported unpredictable lift at the rear when crossing 100 km/h, causing fishtailing even with sticky racing compound tires. Then came the final blow during a public demonstration event outside of Milwaukee in late 1973, A street blade prototype, driven hard by one of AMC's in-house testers, left the track on a sweeping curve, plowing through a guardrail. The driver survived with minor injuries, but the car was totaled. Spectators captured blurry Polaroids of the wreck before it was hastily covered and towed away under orders from corporate. That night, the street blade program was quietly canceled. Executives, already skittish from legal threats and the rising cost of insurance lawsuits, ordered the remaining test mules destroyed. One engineer allegedly tried to drive his prototype home and was immediately reprimanded and forced to surrender the vehicle. It disappeared shortly after. What survives today is mostly rumor, with a few tantalizing fragments. A black and white photo allegedly shows a street blade test car parked near AMC's old proving ground. Wide tires, deep chin spoiler, and a low, predatory stance. A surviving AMC engineer claims to still have the vented prototype hood in his private garage, complete with original street blade stencil faded into the primer underneath. A set of performance headers, too short and oddly angled to fit a stock Hornet, was once spotted on eBay in the early 2000s and mysteriously disappeared after drawing a frenzy of attention from AMC collectors. A former suspension technician summed up the car with a smirk. It was a Hornet on rocket fuel with wings made out of theories. Fast as hell until it wasn't. Number 3. The 1974 Chevrolet El Camino Interceptor concept is a shadowy chapter in General Motors' design archives. A forgotten blend of aggression, innovation, and excess that briefly surfaced before being snuffed out, erased from official memory, and consigned to the ranks of myth. Conceived at a time when the muscle car era was taking its final breaths and the auto industry was beginning to buckle under the pressure of regulations, emissions controls, and insurance crackdowns. The Interceptor was Chevrolet's bold and ultimately doomed attempt to redefine what a performance car truck could be. By 1974, the El Camino was already a well-known oddity in Chevrolet's lineup. A car in the front, a truck in the back. It was a stylish utility vehicle that had found favor with tradesmen, surfers, and performance fans alike. It offered muscle car looks with the added practicality of a pickup bed. But the Interceptor concept was something else entirely. Born out of a secretive design and engineering initiative within GM's Advanced Vehicle Concepts group, the idea was to push the El Camino's limits to an extreme. Not just a sporty utility vehicle, but a road-hugging high-speed pursuit machine. Some sources even claim it was loosely pitched as a law enforcement interceptor for the muscle car era, a kind of civilian-friendly, track-ready hybrid with the versatility of a truck and the soul of a street racer. The foundation of the Interceptor was a heavily modified 1974 El Camino chassis. The body remained mostly recognizable, but underneath it was radically different. Engineers reinforced the frame with boxed steel substructures elements, braced the body mounts, and replaced the standard suspension with a complex, experimental system involving coilover shocks, altered rear geometry, and widened track width. The result was a vehicle that sat lower, with a menacing stance and sharper handling potential than any production El Camino before or since. The heart of the beast was a custom-tuned 454 cubic inch LS6 big block V8, one of the last high-compression monsters still allowed to breathe in the early smog era. Special heads, a high-rise intake, and a tuned exhaust pushed output north of 400 horsepower. And some GM insiders suggest the prototype may have been force-fed by a primitive Ram air system adapted from Corvette components. Mated to a reinforced turbo 400 automatic transmission and a prototype limited slip rear end, the Interceptor had jaw-dropping, straight-line power, reportedly capable of 0-60 in under 6 seconds, unthinkable for something with a truck bed. But the Interceptor's ambition was also its undoing. Early road testing was promising, until they pushed it to its limits. During high-speed cornering trials at the GM Milford Proving Grounds, the Interceptor revealed a terrifying flaw. Despite all the chassis reinforcements, the rear subframe couldn't cope with the stress of lateral loads at sustained high speeds. One prototype suffered a partial structural collapse when the reinforced trailing arms buckled during a 100+ mph sweeper. Another issue quickly surfaced. The brakes, borrowed from a Caprice police package, weren't nearly strong enough to rein in the Interceptor's mass and power. One test engineer described the experiences as like trying to stop a bull with a dish towel. After a series of close calls and a near rollover incident, the GM legal department got involved. Safety concerns mounted, liability fears skyrocketed, and despite the enthusiasm of several engineers who believed the flaws could be corrected, upper management shut down the project. The remaining prototypes, reportedly 2 complete running vehicles and 1 half-finished shell, were ordered destroyed. No public announcement was made. No press releases. No concept car tour. The Interceptor was simply wiped from the books. All that remains today are whispers, grainy sketches found in a retired designer's estate sale, and stories passed between longtime GM insiders. One rendering, now in private hands, shows a low-slung El Camino with a chopped front spoiler, side exhausts, and hood-mounted tachometer, wearing a sinister black and silver paint scheme and the word Interceptor stenciled faintly near the rear fenders. A former GM chassis engineer, now retired and living in Arizona, once reflected, "It was the fastest thing on 4 wheels with a bed. But it wasn't safe, it wasn't sane, it was a madman's dream. And that's why we loved it." In many ways, the 1974 El Camino Interceptor was the last roar of an era obsessed with speed, style, and the belief that any car, no matter how unconventional, could be made fast with enough imagination and iron. It was a rolling contradiction, a muscle-bound utility coupe that could outrun a Corvette, but had the stopping power of a school bus. Too extreme for production, too dangerous for promotion. It disappeared into the ether, leaving only rumors, sketches, and the tantalizing idea of what. Number 4. The 1975 Pontiac Firebird X-Force Coupe prototype is one of the most tantalizing lost chapters in the saga of American performance cars. A strange, nearly mythical beast created in secret, designed to rewrite what a muscle car could be just as the entire genre was collapsing under the weight of regulation, insurance hikes, and the oil crisis. The X-Force wasn't just another trim package or cosmetic one-off. It was a futuristic vision of what Pontiac thought the Firebird might become in a turbocharged, high-speed future. For a moment, it almost worked, and then it all fell apart. In 1975, Pontiac was in a bind. The golden age of high-compression V8s was officially over. New emissions and safety standards were strangling power outputs and stretching development budgets. Sales of muscle cars were sinking. The Firebird, especially the Trans Am, remained a bright spot. Still flashy, still aggressive, but it was also beginning to age. Internally, Pontiac executives and engineers asked themselves a desperate question. Could they reimagine the Firebird not as a relic of the past, but as a spearhead of the future? Enter the X-Force project. It began deep within Pontiac's Advanced Concepts division, reportedly under the guidance of a small team of engineers who had worked on the aborted Banshee 2 program. Their goal was radical: fuse high-speed aerodynamics, space-age styling, and the bleeding edge of forced induction technology into a single, menacing Firebird unlike anything ever seen before. This wouldn't just be a Firebird with a body kit and hood scoop. This would be something else entirely. A turbocharged Predator designed to take on European exotics and American legends alike. The body was the first thing to change. Using wind tunnel data and experimental composites, Pontiac designers gave the X-Force a sharply reworked nose, featuring deep, functional air intakes on either side of the front fascia. The traditional shaker scoop was gone, replaced by a wide, louvered cowl induction system molded into a lower-profile hood with sculpted channels for airflow. The rear of the car was even more radical: a sloped fastback with flush glass, integrated lip spoiler, and an unusual camback-style tail treatment. The entire car sat lower than a production Trans Am and was reportedly fitted with unique lightweight panels made from fiberglass aluminum hybrids that would later influence Pontiac's 1980s Fiero development. Underneath this sinister skin lurks something even more radical: a turbocharged 301 cubic inch V8, an ancestor of the production turbo engine that would later appear much watered down in the 1980-81 Trans Am Turbo. But in the X-Force, the engine was uncorked, experimental, and borderline unstable. Early dyno figures reportedly reached 350 horsepower, with torque spikes that could overwhelm the Firebird's rear suspension in an instant. The turbo setup was primitive by modern standards. Single turbo, side-mounted intercooler, mechanical wastegate, but it delivered boost and explosive surges. One test driver allegedly described the car's throttle response as, "Press the pedal, count to 3, then hold on to your soul." Unfortunately, that unpredictability became the X-Force's undoing. Multiple test sessions revealed major flaws. On several runs at GM's proving grounds, the engine suffered uncontrolled boost surges, leading to detonation, misfires, and catastrophic failure of internal components. Cooling problems plagued the turbo housing. At full throttle, the X-Force was blisteringly fast, estimated 0 to 60 in 5.3 seconds, with trap speeds exceeding 130 mph. But none of the test mules could complete a full endurance run without overheating or exhibiting dangerous handling quirks. Worse still, the X-Force's modified suspension, an experimental setup with rear trailing arms and a stiffened front crossmember, proved ill-suited to managing the sudden torque spikes. On more than one occasion, drivers experienced snap oversteer when the boost hit mid-corner, resulting in terrifying slides and at least one high-speed spin-out that sent a prototype into the crash barrier. No one was seriously injured, but the writing was on the wall. After just 4 completed prototypes and several partially built shells, Pontiac quietly pulled the plug on the X-Force project. With budget constraints tightening and pressure from them to focus on emissions-compliant engines, the entire program was mothballed. The prototypes were destroyed, the engineering notes archived and sealed, and the designers reassigned. No official announcement was ever made. Like so many stillborn dream cars of the 1970s, the X-Force was buried under layers of corporate red tape and silence. Today, the only surviving traces of the X-Force are a few faded design sketches, a grainy Polaroid showing a silver Firebird with an unusual hood treatment at a GM test lot, and the recollections of a few aging Pontiac engineers who still speak of it with a mix. Number 5. The 1976 Dodge Dart Raging Bull prototype stands as one of the most intense and enigmatic what-could-have-beens of the post-muscle car era. A last-gasp attempt by Dodge engineers to recapture lost thunder as the golden age of American performance cars collapsed under the weight of regulation, insurance hikes, and economic recession. Built in secrecy and bred from defiance, the Raging Bull was not just another Dart trim level or decal package. It was a genuine street brawler packed with big engine fury in a compact bare-knuckle wrapper. It could have rewritten the rules for compact American performance. Instead, it was deemed too raw, too dangerous, and ultimately too late. By 1976, the Dart was aging. Introduced in 1963, it had become Dodge's stalwart compact, reliable, cheap, and familiar. But it was also staid, seen as an old man's car, especially as Chrysler began preparing to retire it in favor of newer platforms like the Aspen and Volare. Yet inside Dodge's performance engineering team, there were still a few veterans of the Scat Pack days, guys who remembered Super Bees, Demons, and the madcap horsepower wars of the late 60s. They didn't want to let the Dart die a slow, quiet death. They wanted one last swing. That swing became the Raging Bull. The concept was simple. Take the lightest, most stripped-down Dart body available, then stuff it with the meanest performance gear Dodge could fit without breaking the firewall or the legal department. The team chose the 360 cubic inch LA Series small block as the heart of the beast, but not the standard emission-choked version used in production Darts. This one was built to pre-smog specs, using parts cannibalized from earlier 340 TA builds and Mopar direct connection race catalogs. High lift cam, forged pistons, free flow heads, dual plane intake, and a Holley 750 double pumper. Output estimates varied, but insiders peg it between 325 and 340 horsepower, more than enough to vaporize the rear tires of the 200-pound compact. To manage all that muscle, the Raging Bull received a host of upgrades: reinforced subframes, a beefed-up 8 3/4-inch rear axle, front disc brakes borrowed from the B-body Charger, and a heavy-duty leaf spring package. Engineers also worked on a fast ratio manual steering box and tried to dial in the handling with stiffer sway bars and Coney shocks. Though the Dart's basic architecture was never meant to corner at 80 mph, the exterior was intentionally understated. No cartoonish graphics or wild scoops. A flat black hood with twin vents, blacked-out grille, and staggered steel wheels gave it a brutish look. The prototype wore simple Raging Bull badging on the fenders in block script, and the only true telltale was the deep, throaty exhaust note, reportedly loud enough to trip police sound meters even at idle. On paper, it was magic. In a straight line, it was a terror. Early tests recorded 0-60 in under 5.8 seconds and quarter-mile passes in the high 13s, faster than many mid-70s Corvettes, and nearly every muscle car still limping through the malaise era. But then came the flaws, serious ones. The Raging Bull's suspension geometry, despite improvements, still traced its roots back to early 60s economy car architecture. At high speeds or on uneven roads, the car became jumpy and unpredictable. Several testers reported snap oversteer at the limit and unsettling front-end lift under hard throttle. Worse, the upgraded braking system, though better than stock, couldn't keep up. After just 2 or 3 hard stops, the car suffered brake fades severe enough to nearly cause an off-track excursion at Chrysler's Chelsea proving grounds. One Chrysler safety engineer supposedly called it a ballistic missile with drum brakes. The final nail came after a particularly violent incident during a closed test session. A Raging Bull prototype lost control during a high-speed run on a semi-wet course, spinning violently and narrowly missing a retaining wall. No one was hurt, but the resulting legal review, combined with already growing concern about safety litigation and the specter of the Ford Pinto controversy looming in the industry, led Chrysler executives to quietly pull the plug. No press release, no fanfare, no mention in any brochures. The Raging Bull was shelved, and its prototypes, reportedly only 2 fully assembled vehicles and 1 test mule, were ordered scrapped. One may have survived, hidden in a storage warehouse near the old Hamtramck plant, but its fate remains unknown. A few internal documents and faded black and white photos have surfaced among Mopar collectors, showing a Prempter-grade Dart with black wheels in a deeply menacing stance. A retired Dodge engine builder, interviewed at a Mopar Nationals event decades later, described it with a grin. The Raging Bull was a little car with a bad attitude. It didn't want to cruise. It wanted to bite. And bite it did, hard enough to scare the suits, loud enough. Number 6. The 1977 Mercury Cougar Phantom concept remains one of the most fascinating and elusive hidden chapters in Ford's design history. A forgotten experiment where elegance collided head-on with raw engineering audacity. It was a machine born of contradiction, a refined personal luxury coupe reinvented in secret to become a stealth speed predator. Cloaked in anonymity, stripped of traditional branding, and loaded with bleeding-edge technology that bordered on science fiction, the Cougar Phantom was less of a car and more of a glimpse into an alternate future, one where Mercury led the high-tech performance frontier instead of slowly fading into anonymity. By the mid-1970s, the Cougar had shifted far from its pony car roots. Originally introduced as a more sophisticated alternative to the Ford Mustang, it had gradually bloated into a cushy mid-size luxury coupe, more chrome, more comfort, less bite. But within Mercury's design studios, a small radical team wasn't ready to give up on the Cougar's performance bloodline. These were the same designers and engineers who had watched the Eliminator program disappear at the dawn of the emissions era. They wanted to bring the Cougar back, not with brute power, but with aerodynamics, stealth, and advanced tech the public had never seen. Codenamed Phantom, the project began in early 1976 with a simple but provocative idea. What if a Mercury Cougar could disappear into the wind? The prototype began life as a 1907 Cougar XR7 shell, but almost nothing under the skin remained stock. The body panels were subtly recontoured with clay and wind tunnel tweaks, smoothed to a degree that resembled European Grand Tourers of the time. The massive chrome bumpers were scrapped in favor of integrated composite surrounds. Hidden headlamps, already a Cougar staple, were redesigned with a unique flip-down visor system that reduced frontal area even when the lights were open. The grille was narrowed and recessed, with barely visible air channels shaped by advanced flow modeling. From above, the body resembled a soft arrowhead, long, low, and devoid of ornamentation. Every line served a function. But it wasn't just looks. Beneath the hood was something experimental. A high-compression 351 Cleveland V8 paired to a rudimentary electronic engine control unit, one of the earliest pre-EEC4 systems developed in partnership with Ford's aerospace division. The ECU managed fuel delivery and ignition timing dynamically, allowing the car to adapt to different altitude and load conditions, an early stab at what would later become standard engine management. Coupled with a performance-tuned 4-speed automatic and a special rear axle with torque biasing differential, the Phantom had the mechanical bones of a high-speed cruiser. Inside, the prototype was stripped down but elegant. A leather-wrapped dash housed the digital aircraft-style readouts, and early fiber optic warning indicators lined the driver's periphery. Adjustable seat bolsters and a tilt telescope wheel gave it a cockpit-like feel, and a low-glare canopy made of experimental laminated glass curved tightly around the cabin. The whole interior was designed for speed, not flash. Most impressively, and most disastrously, the Cougar Phantom featured an early form of active aerodynamics. The rear deck lid incorporated a flush-mounted, speed-sensitive spoiler that would rise at around 70 mph, while small underbody flaps were designed to deploy to stabilize airflow beneath the car. These were controlled by a mechanical linkage tied to the transmission and vacuum-actuated sensors, a low-tech version of what Porsche and Ferrari would later perfect in the 1980s. It was groundbreaking, it was beautiful, and it was dangerous. During high-speed testing at Ford's Arizona Proving Grounds, the Phantom was reported to be staggeringly fast for its size, easily exceeding 135 mph with shocking stability, until it didn't. The rear spoiler, tied to an unreliable vacuum system, would sometimes fail to deploy, or worse, retract suddenly at speed. When that happened, rear downforce plummeted, causing the rear end to lift unexpectedly. One test driver described it as like driving a hovercraft on roller skates. On more than one occasion, the Phantom entered a high-speed corner and exited it sideways. In one terrifying incident, a test mule lost control at 120 mph and spun into the desert scrub, narrowly avoiding a catastrophic rollover. These incidents, combined with rising internal anxiety about cost overruns, liability, and the complexity of the electronic systems, killed the project. It didn't help that new federal crash and emissions regulations were looming, threatening to make the whole car uncompliant before it could ever be released. Ford executives, already rattled by the Pinto fires and Mustang II backlash, refused to sign off on a production model. The Phantom was locked away, and its development records were buried within Mercury's internal. Number 7. The 1978 Oldsmobile Starfire Shadow was an ambitious but ultimately tragic chapter in Oldsmobile's late 70s quest to stay relevant amid a changing automotive landscape. As the muscle car era faded and fuel economy and emission standards tightened, the brand sought a way to blend modern technology with performance in its mid-size lineup. The Starfire Shadow was the product of that desire, conceived as a lightweight, turbocharged, rally-inspired fighter that could punch far above its weight, both literally and figuratively. Unfortunately, that dream was cut short before it ever reached showrooms or the public eye. The base platform for the Shadow was the 1978 Oldsmobile Starfire, a respectable but somewhat bland mid-size coupe built on the GMG body architecture, shared with the Cutlass and other siblings. The Starfire was already positioned as a step above the typical family cruiser, offering sporty trim and more luxurious appointments. But Oldsmobile's engineers and performance specialists, driven by a mix of youthful enthusiasm and mounting pressure from management to innovate, began exploring a far more radical version to invigorate the aging model. The core concept was deceptively simple. Take the Starfire's existing body and chassis, strip weight where possible, then pair it with a turbocharged V8 engine designed to deliver strong, responsive power with improved fuel efficiency. Oldsmobile's experimental 4.3-liter V8 turbocharged power plant was a modified version of the 5.7-liter diesel block, using forged internals, water-cooled turbo housing, and advanced fuel injection systems for the era. Target power was in the range of 250 to 280 horsepower. Impressive numbers for the time, especially considering the car's intended weight reduction. Speaking of weight, the Shadow's engineers replaced traditional steel panels with all aluminum bodywork, including doors, hood, and fenders, an innovative approach to cut down mass and improve handling. This use of aluminum in a mid-size American car was almost unprecedented then, and it brought the Starfire's curb weight down by nearly 500 pounds compared to the standard model, promising nimble agility and sharp cornering. Early testing generated excitement. The turbocharged engine produced a strong mid-range surge, and the lightweight body allowed the car to respond quickly to driver inputs on winding roads. Engineers boasted that the Starfire Shadow could run with smaller European sports cars of the time, which was a bold claim for a GM product. But trouble soon mounted. The turbo system, cutting-edge but unrefined, generated tremendous heat under sustained load. The intercooler design, still in a prototype phase, was unable to maintain stable intake air temperatures. The engine compartment became a furnace, causing accelerated wear on hoses, wiring, and nearby components. On one infamous test run in Arizona's summer heat, a Shadow prototype's turbocharger seized catastrophically, damaging the entire top end of the engine. Meanwhile, the all-aluminum body panels presented an engineering challenge far beyond mere weight savings. While light, they lacked the inherent structural rigidity of steel, leading to flexing and creaking at high speeds. On rough or twisty roads, test drivers reported a vague, less confident feel through the chassis, as if the car's structure wasn't holding itself together properly. This subtle but unnerving behavior worried engineers and raised serious safety concerns. The final blow came during a series of harsh endurance runs on a demanding test track in Michigan. With engine cooling compromised and the chassis under stress, several prototypes suffered minor collisions, mostly from sudden handling, unpredictability, and driver loss of confidence. Management grew increasingly wary of the risks. Oldsmobile's marketing department feared that news of an experimental turbocharged rally car with structural and reliability issues could irreparably damage the brand's cautious, family-friendly image. So in late 1978, the decision was made. The Starfire Shadow program would be quietly ended. All prototypes were dismantled or crushed, and technical documentation was locked away in vaults. The project faded into obscurity, known today only through a handful of internal memos and whispered stories among Oldsmobile engineers and GM historians. One former Oldsmobile test engineer remembered, "We were chasing ghosts and shadows, trying to build a wild pony from a family horse. It looked great on paper, but reality hit hard and fast." The 1978 Oldsmobile Starfire Shadow remains a testament to a brand caught between eras, dreaming of performance and innovation, but ultimately grounded by the harsh realities of engineering and corporate caution. It's a story of potential lost, of a car that might have redefined American rally performance, but instead became a secret ghost in Oldsmobile's history, remembered only in fragmented reports. Number 8, the 1979 Buick Electrovortex prototype stands as a remarkable yet little-known experiment where Buick sought to shatter its own image of quiet, dignified luxury and venture into the thrilling realm of high-performance sedans, a bold attempt to marry opulence with adrenaline. Known primarily for its smooth ride, plush interiors, and restrained styling, the Electra was Buick's flagship for comfortable executive-class cruising. But by the late 1970s, a growing faction within Buick's engineering division yearned to rewrite the script, envisioning a car that could surprise and excite without sacrificing refinement. The Vortex was the result of this internal rebellion, an audacious concept vehicle that sought to bring aerospace engineering principles to Detroit's luxury sedans. The project began in early 1978 as part of Buick's quietly launched Advanced Performance program, aimed at developing next-generation powertrains and chassis technology. Central to the Vortex's identity was its sculpted, futuristic body, designed with help from aerospace consultants who studied airflow and turbulence at supersonic scales. The exterior was radically different from the Electra's usual stately lines, sharp edges, deep scoops, and a prominent wedge-shaped front end, all crafted from lightweight aluminum panels to shave hundreds of pounds off the typical Electra's weight. Underneath the aggressively styled hood lay the heart of the project, a detuned version of Buick's familiar 5.7-liter V8, but now equipped with a Roots-type supercharger. This setup was carefully calibrated to produce around 280 horsepower, far more than the standard Electra engines of the time, while preserving the smooth, effortless torque curve Buick customers expected. The transmission was a modified version of the turbo-hydromatic 350 with rapid-fire shifting controls and reinforced internals designed to handle the extra boost. On paper, the Vortex promised an exhilarating blend of performance and luxury. The chassis was stiffened with extensive structural reinforcements, including a boxed frame and upgraded suspension components borrowed from the Regal GS model. Handling and braking systems were reworked to give the car a sharp, responsive character, a far cry from the usual cushioned Buick ride. But the reality was far messier. From the moment testing began, the Vortex struggled with severe torque steer, a harsh and unsettling pull to one side under hard acceleration, a problem exacerbated by the supercharged V8's power delivery. The front suspension, despite modifications, was overwhelmed by the engine's twisting forces, causing erratic steering feedback and uneven tire wear. Attempts to recalibrate the suspension geometry and add electronic steering dampers offered only marginal improvement. Compounding the handling woes, the transmission suffered frequent mechanical failures. The rapid shift solenoids overheated, valves jammed, and clutches slipped under the high torque conditions. Testing logs reveal multiple breakdowns on both closed courses and simulated highway runs. The powertrain's unpredictability, combined with the car's unusual weight distribution due to the aluminum panels and reinforced chassis, made it a handful even for experienced test drivers. Internal engineering meetings grew increasingly tense. The ambitious vision of a luxury car with sports car vigor was being undermined by fundamental design conflicts. Costs to fix the issues began to spiral, and the risk of introducing a car with questionable reliability and drivability clashed with Buick's traditionally conservative brand philosophy. By mid-1979, the decision was made to quietly terminate the Vortex program. All prototypes, only 4 are known to have been built, were dismantled or hidden in secure storage, and any documentation was either classified or shredded to prevent leaks. No marketing materials or sales plans were ever drafted, and the Electra lineup quietly returned to its familiar blend of comfort and dignified cruising. One former Buick engineer, speaking decades later under condition of anonymity, reflected, "The Vortex was Buick trying to fly too close to the sun. We had the tech, but the marriage of luxury and performance wasn't ready. The car fought us every step of the way." Today, the Buick Electrovortex exists mostly as an intriguing footnote, a symbol of a fleeting moment when Buick dared to dream big and almost shattered its own identity. It's a ghost of innovation lost, buried beneath layers of corporate caution and the harsh realities of engineering challenges. For those who study the era, it remains a testament to ambition and the fine line between visionary and folly in the automotive world. Number 9. The 1975 Chrysler New Yorker Talon represents one of the most ambitious yet ultimately tragic stories in Chrysler's mid-1970s history, a time when the American auto industry was struggling to redefine itself amid the twin storms of the energy crisis and mounting federal regulations. The New Yorker name had long stood as a symbol of refined luxury and quiet dignity, a flagship sedan offering plush comfort for traditional buyers. But behind the scenes, Chrysler's engineers and designers were daring to imagine a vastly different future, a New Yorker that could roar with the ferocity of a muscle car and command attention with futuristic styling. The Talon was the embodiment of that vision, a coupe designed to shake off its stately image and assert itself as a genuine performance machine. The kind of car that could stand toe-to-toe with the muscle and personal luxury coupes of the era, and even point toward what performance cars could become in the uncertain decade ahead. From the outset, the Talon was conceived as a radical departure from the conservative norm. The car's design was sharp, angular, and aggressive, a departure from Chrysler's usual boxy and formal styling. It featured a dramatically lowered stance with a wider track for enhanced road grip and stability, flared wheel arches that hinted at the power beneath, and a front fascia dominated by a wide grille, flanked by quad rectangular headlights that seemed to glare like the eyes of a predator. The rear was no less distinctive. A sculpted integrated spoiler flowed seamlessly from the trunk lid, carefully crafted to generate downforce at high speeds while preserving clean lines. The overall aesthetic was a bold blend of futuristic aerodynamics and muscle car bravado, a look that, even today, would turn heads. At the heart of the Talon's promise was an engineering marvel, or at least what Chrysler hoped would be one. The car was powered by an advanced dual-turbocharged 440 cubic inch V8 engine, a feat of forced induction engineering that was well ahead of its time. By utilizing twin turbochargers, Chrysler aimed to deliver a broad and potent torque curve, enabling explosive acceleration while mitigating the infamous turbo lag of early turbo systems. The engine was designed to push out an estimated 350 horsepower, a significant jump over most contemporaries, and to provide smooth power delivery that could satisfy both the enthusiast and the luxury cruiser. This was not merely a muscle car engine dropped into a coupe. It was a carefully engineered power plant designed to blend brutal force with modern refinement. Yet the Talon's promise was largely on paper. During the limited prototype testing, serious problems began to emerge, exposing the gulf between ambition and reality. The dual-turbo setup, innovative but fragile, produced massive heat under extended use. The cooling system, though upgraded with larger radiators and auxiliary fans, was unable to dissipate the heat effectively. Test engineers reported episodes where the engine bay reached dangerously high temperatures, causing premature wear to critical components, such as the turbo housings, fuel lines, and ignition systems. The overheating not only risked mechanical failure, but also posed potential safety hazards. One test driver recalled feeling the engine compartment become like a furnace, with heat radiating through the hood and even affecting the cockpit. Meanwhile, the transmission, an upgraded version of Chrysler's TorqueFlite automatic, was continuously strained by the sudden torque spikes from the turbochargers. Although reinforced internally, the transmission began exhibiting frequent slippage and erratic shifting behavior under heavy acceleration. This undermined driver confidence and further complicated the Talon's already problematic handling dynamics. Chrysler's engineers attempted multiple fixes, including recalibrating shift points, improving cooling for the transmission fluid, and adding mechanical reinforcements, but none provided a long-term solution. The transmission problems contributed heavily to reliability concerns that management simply could not ignore. Compounding the mechanical failures were the challenges posed by the car's advanced chassis and suspension. The Talon featured a stiffened frame with upgraded suspension components to handle the increased power and improve handling precision. Yet the combination of aggressive power delivery and a chassis that had been stretched beyond its original design parameters resulted in unpredictable driving characteristics. During high-speed testing, the Talon showed tendencies towards sudden oversteer, especially on tight corners or uneven surfaces. Suspension failures and premature tire wear were frequently logged, and test drivers described the handling as nervous and unpredictable, far from the composed ride Chrysler's usual buyers expected. All of these issues, overheating engine, transmission slippage. Number 10. The 1904 Lincoln Continental Knifeseeker is one of the most enigmatic and shadowy chapters in Lincoln's storied history. A car that dared to push the boundaries of luxury and performance, but ended up buried beneath layers of corporate discretion and tragedy. In an era when Lincoln was best known for delivering vast, comfortable land yachts that epitomized American prestige and refinement, the Nightwalker represented a daring attempt to inject a bold new spirit into the Continental line. A spirit of aggression, advanced technology, and raw power that flew in the face of the brand's traditionally stately image. The project began in the early 1970s as part of Lincoln's secret advanced performance initiative, a low-profile program aimed at exploring how luxury cars could evolve with the emerging trends of turbocharging and sophisticated chassis tuning. The Nightwalker was envisioned as a high-performance luxury sedan, built not just to offer comfort, but to deliver spine-tingling acceleration and razor-sharp handling that could rival European sports sedans of the day. Under the hood, Lincoln engineers fitted a specially modified version of their familiar 460 cubic inch V8, enhanced with a prototype turbocharging system. Unlike many early turbo attempts that suffered from lag and unpredictability, the Nightwalker's engine was calibrated to deliver smooth, immediate boost through an intricate intercooling system and a revised fuel injection setup. Rated conservatively at around 350 horsepower, the powertrain promised a significant leap forward in performance for a car that usually emphasized smoothness over speed. Styling for the Nightwalker was just as radical as its powertrain. The front end was aggressively reworked, featuring a squared-off nose with a wide mesh grille and integrated fog lamps recessed into sharply sculpted bumper sections. The headlights were unique dual rectangular units with a subtle smoky tint, lending the car a menacing glare. Blacked-out trim replaced the usual chrome accents, and the overall stance was lower and more planted, with flared wheel arches housing wider tires designed for improved grip. But beneath the exterior, it was the Nightwalker's chassis and suspension where the most ambitious modifications took place. Lincoln's engineers reimagined the Continental's vast, soft frame with altered suspension geometry, reinforced subframes, and progressive rate springs to balance ride comfort with sporty dynamics. The car also incorporated a suite of advanced safety features for the time, including early versions of anti-lock braking systems and traction control prototypes, intended to tame the extra power and keep the car stable in challenging conditions. Unfortunately, these technical innovations could not overcome fundamental engineering challenges. During high-speed testing, the altered chassis geometry revealed unpredictable and dangerous behavior during emergency maneuvers. Test drivers noted a tendency for the rear end to become unsettled under abrupt lane changes or sudden braking, behavior that was exacerbated by the car's weight and high center of gravity. Attempts to refine the suspension setup and recalibrate the electronic aids yielded only partial improvements. Tragically, the Nightwalker's fate was sealed during a private demonstration on a secluded test track in early 1974. A Lincoln executive riding with an experienced test driver lost control during a high-speed evasive maneuver. The car spun violently and crashed, killing the executive instantly. The accident shocked Lincoln's leadership, and internal investigations quickly identified the car's unpredictable handling as the primary cause. In the aftermath, Lincoln swiftly canceled the Nightwalker program, ordering all prototypes to be destroyed or locked away in deep corporate archives. Public acknowledgement of the car's existence was avoided, and the incident was quietly covered up, becoming a whispered cautionary tale among Lincoln engineers and insiders. One former engineer, speaking decades later, reflected on the project's ambitions and tragic end. "We wanted to show that Lincoln could be more than just luxury and comfort. We wanted performance with sophistication. But we underestimated the challenges. The Nightwalker was a lesson learned the hard way." Today, the 1974 Lincoln Continental Nightwalker remains a ghost in the automotive world, an experimental outlier with a tragic story that symbolizes both the bold ambition and sobering limits faced by luxury automakers in an era of rapid change. It's a reminder that even the most promising innovations can be derailed by unforeseen dangers, and that sometimes progress carries a heavy cost. Number 11. The 1976 Ford LTD Stealth concept was Ford's audacious attempt to redefine the image of its full-size luxury sedan, transforming the traditionally reliable and unassuming LTD into a dark, stealthy predator on the road. Known mostly as a comfortable, dependable family cruiser and a staple of American suburban streets, the LTD had never been considered a candidate for high performance or aggressive styling. Yet, in a bold move driven by Ford's experimental division, the Stealth concept was born out of the desire to prove that even the heaviest, largest sedans could harbor a surprising degree of speed, agility, and attitude, if only given the right treatment. From the outside, the LTD Stealth looked like a vision from a near-future thriller movie. The design team significantly lowered the car's stance, reducing the massive gap between the fenders and tires to give it a planted, purposeful look. Custom aerodynamic panels were added along the sides and under the car to reduce drag, while a redesigned front fascia featured a sharper, more angular grille and integrated fog lamps recessed beneath a newly sculpted bumper. The rear end was equally transformed, with a subtle spoiler blended into the trunk lid and smoked taillights that gave the car a menacing silhouette at night. Matte black paint with minimal chrome trim completed the illusion, helping the car literally blend into the darkness, hence the Stealth moniker. Underneath this radical makeover, Ford's engineers reworked the LTD's suspension and braking systems to match the sporty intent. A performance-tuned V8 engine was fitted, complete with revised camshafts, upgraded carburation, and a freer-flowing exhaust system. The goal was to unleash more horsepower and torque than the standard LTD, while maintaining the quiet luxury the model was known for. However, the project quickly ran into serious technical hurdles. The LTD's chassis, originally engineered for comfort and stability rather than sportiness, struggled to cope with the changes. The lowered center of gravity and aerodynamic add-ons upset the carefully balanced suspension geometry, resulting in pronounced understeer, where the car resisted turning intended to push wide through corners. This handling issue was exacerbated by the sedan's substantial weight, which made sharp maneuvers sluggish and unpredictable. The braking system, despite upgrades, also showed significant shortcomings. The heavier front end and increased speeds combined to overwhelm the brakes during repeated high-speed stops, leading to excessive fade and longer stopping distances. Internal testing reports revealed these deficiencies as critical safety concerns. Worse still, detailed safety analyses warned that during aggressive high-speed maneuvers, the LTD Stealth could suffer catastrophic failure, including potential loss of control and structural stress on suspension components. Faced with these alarming findings, Ford's executives made the difficult decision to shelve the Stealth concept before it ever reached production or public debut. The prototypes, only 2 or 3 were ever built, were quietly dismantled or stored away, and all technical documentation was locked in confidential files. The project became one of Ford's best-kept secrets, occasionally surfacing in internal memos and whispered anecdotes among engineers who worked on it. A former Ford engineer, reminiscing years later, described the Stealth as a project born of idealism, but doomed by practical realities. We wanted to prove that a big luxury car could be sporty, fast, and still comfortable. But the LTD was just too heavy, too soft underneath. We learned that sometimes the chassis tells you what it won't do, no matter how much power or style you add. Today, the 1976 Ford LTD Stealth concept remains a fascinating what-if in the annals of American automotive history, a rare glimpse at a car that might have changed perceptions about full-size luxury sedans, but instead became a cautionary tale about the limits of modification. It's a testament to Ford's willingness to push boundaries, even if the technology and platform of the time were not quite ready for the challenge. Number 12. The 1907 AMC Ambassador Vengeance prototype stands as one of American Motors Corporation's most intriguing yet ill-fated attempts to revitalize its aging flagship with a fresh dose of youthful aggression and performance swagger. For years, the Ambassador had been the embodiment of AMC's vision of traditional American luxury, a comfortable, spacious sedan that prioritized ride quality and conservative styling over raw power or sporting dynamics. However, by the mid-1970s, changing market trends and the rise of muscle and personal luxury cars aimed at younger buyers pressured AMC to rethink its approach. The Vengeance was the company's bold, if brief, response to this challenge. Conceived in secrecy within AMC's performance division, the Vengeance prototype was envisioned as a transformation of the Ambassador from a stately cruiser into a street-smart muscle sedan capable of holding its own against more established competitors. Its exterior was extensively reworked, shedding the Ambassador's conservative lines in favor of aggressive, sculpted body contours. The front end featured a wider, more assertive grille flanked by hidden headlights, while the hood sported functional air scoops hinting at the power lurking beneath. A carefully integrated rear spoiler added aerodynamic function and visual attitude, rounding out a look designed to turn heads and signal the car's new intent. Beneath the sculpted skin was a highly tuned, high-output V8 engine, upgraded from AMC's standard power plants. Tuned for rapid acceleration and strong mid-range torque, the engine promised performance figures that would put the Vengeance in muscle car territory, an impressive feat for a brand more often associated with practical economy than blistering speed. Complementing the engine was a radically reworked suspension system. Firmer springs, upgraded shocks, and reinforced sway bars intended to sharpen handling and control body roll without sacrificing too much ride comfort. The brakes were beefed up with larger discs and improved calipers, aiming to ensure the car could stop as impressively as it accelerated. Despite these ambitious upgrades, the Vengeance's development quickly encountered severe obstacles. Early testing revealed persistent reliability problems, especially related to the engine's forced induction components and the upgraded suspension's durability under stress. The powertrain, though potent, suffered from frequent overheating and erratic throttle response, undermining the car's drivability. Meanwhile, the suspension, while firmer, sometimes resulted in unsettling behavior at higher speeds. Reports of sudden oversteer during aggressive cornering caused alarm among test drivers and engineers alike. AMC's leadership found themselves at a crossroads. On one hand, the Vengeance represented a potential new direction for the Ambassador and a chance to capture a younger demographic eager for muscle and style. On the other, the unresolved mechanical issues and the risk of tarnishing AMC's reputation for reliability and upscale comfort made the project a liability. Compounding the problem was the increasing regulatory pressure around emissions and safety, which complicated efforts to refine and certify the prototype for production. Ultimately, the decision was made to terminate the Vengeance project quietly. Only a single prototype was ever constructed, and after a brief series of tests, it was spirited away into the company's archives, never to be seen publicly. The prototype's fate remains a mystery, rumored to have been dismantled or lost during AMC's turbulent years leading up to its eventual merger with Renault. A former AMC engineer who had a glimpse into the project's final days reflected, "The Vengeance had heart, no doubt, but it was a wild beast we couldn't quite tame. For AMC, it was a risk too far, especially when the brand's image was everything." Today, the 1977 AMC Ambassador Vengeance prototype is remembered only by enthusiasts and historians as a tantalizing what could have been, a glimpse at AMC's ambition to evolve from staid luxury into raw, youthful performance, thwarted by the harsh realities of engineering limits and market forces. Its brief life encapsulates the challenges faced by smaller automakers trying to compete in a rapidly shifting automotive landscape where innovation often came with steep costs and uncertain rewards.